You've lived a great life and done well for yourself. But what mark will you leave on the world? How will you inspire future generations? Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand have helped thousands of people answer exactly those questions. If you've ever wondered, what will be my legacy? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Your Life, Your Legacy podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Stan and Katie Beth.
Welcome to the Your Life, Your Legacy podcast with your hosts, Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand. Today, we are looking at the life and legacy of educator, Arkansas cattle farmer, mentor, and of course, husband and father, Melvin Daniel. We're joined today by his daughter, Melissa Anthony. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So to give our listeners a little bit of background on your dad and why we're kind of doing this story now, your father passed away in August of this year, August of 2023. And this story actually came to our attention because after his passing, even though Stan and I live pretty far away, we're in a completely different town, we had multiple people reach out to us and say, hey, I have a story about somebody who really left a legacy. So tell us a little bit of background about, let's not jump too far in yet. Tell us a little bit about your dad's career background and his education experience and the work that he did.
My dad went to college, one of the first in his family to do so. And he even had to hitch a ride to get there, but he was determined to get an education. He graduated from Oklahoma State University, but he taught agriculture at Lake Hamilton High School for over 30 years after 1 year at Glenwood. And he just never quit. I mean, even after he retired from Lake Hamilton, one of his colleagues from Foreman called him up and said, hey, we can't find an ag teacher and we're in desperate need for one. You think you teach at Foreman for just a little while until we can find someone. So he even taught at Foreman a couple of years just to help somebody out. And then he just still couldn't quit. So he went to the extension service and he worked there with the Master Gardener program and worked with the 4-H kids there. And even after retiring from there, he was on every board known to man that had anything to do with agriculture, just because he wanted to stay active in that field. He loved it. He loved the people and just never wanted to quit. He was always going nonstop to support the cause and to help other people out. So.
That's fantastic. So he got started in agriculture back in the 1960s. So it's changed quite a bit over the span of his lifetime.
Absolutely.
and the things that he's been doing from the technology and the way we did things back in the 60s. What got him interested in agriculture in the first place? How did that happen?
Well, growing up, he came from really humble beginnings, and he had 7 brothers and sisters, and they pretty much all worked the land and had animals growing up to help provide for the family. And so his initial, I think, interest was that that's the way he was brought up. He was raised with agriculture supporting him. And so I think he just saw the importance of it. He knew the impact of it, and he wanted to learn more about it. And the more he learned, the more he wanted to learn. And then the more he wanted to teach other people to help them out.
Absolutely. So I also found it interesting as I was looking through just some of the interviews and things, quotes that people gave after your father passed. I thought it was interesting that he had multiple former students say that your dad is the reason they decided to become ag teachers when they grew up. And I feel like that's such a powerful statement about the legacy your dad left, that multiple students not only appreciated him for the work that he did, but that they were so deeply influenced by him that it kind of changed their trajectory of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've heard stories like this. Tell us 1 or 2 stories about the influence your dad had either on your life or on someone's life that you know.
Well, I'll start with some things that came to light after his passing. People would just want to share, stories about him with me and the family. And I heard on numerous occasions that the people talking to me would tell me they would not be where they were had it not been for him. And it wasn't necessarily all agriculture related careers they were referencing. It was just the fact that he always pushed them to get an advanced degree, to learn a trade. He always wanted them to find their path, their niche, and to be successful. And he didn't give up on them. If they weren't able to participate in things because of their home lives, didn't have transportation, whatever the money, whatever the case, he made a plan, and he made sure to get everyone included and encourage those to participate that might not have otherwise been able to do so. So I'm, as far as personally, I was always right at my dad's heels. He taught me so much growing up, and he always had the philosophy that if kids were busy, they were staying out of trouble. So he kept me really busy, but I wouldn't have had it any other way. He was always taking groups of kids on trips for judging competitions, for parliamentary procedure, for leadership conferences. There was always something to be involved in. And of course, I was at every one of them that I was possibly eligible to attend, because he wanted me learning as much as I could. But as I looked around, I saw that it wasn't just me he did that for. He was doing that for everybody, because I shared my dad with so many kids over the years, and I wouldn't have it any other way, because I saw kids who didn't have a father or didn't have a male role model. My dad was that for them, and it just really blesses me to hear those stories now and to know that I'm not the only benefactor of what he did for not only the field of agriculture, but just giving people a sense of family, a sense of pride in themselves, and the confidence to get out there and accomplish something.
Absolutely. Stan, I know you have questions for Melissa. I've been hogging the show. You go for it.
Oh, you're doing great. I knew your dad, not well, but I heard about his passing, and I heard that that you guys had to find a bigger venue for the funeral. Lots of people showed up for that. I'm curious, people don't have the kind of influence that your dad has without themselves having been influenced by others. Who would you say, and being his daughter, you probably know the answer to this, right? Who would you say were the positive influences in his life, and what impact did they have?
Well, so much of that happened before me, so I'm gonna have to.
But you've heard the stories, though. You've heard the
Yes,
stories.
yes. I told you that it was his family and his upbringing that I think really inspired him to pursue the field of agriculture. But he had a lot of drive to want to make a better life for himself. He wasn't raised with a lot of money, but he wanted to be able to provide for a family one day. So I know that encouraged him to do that. But as he got into the field of agriculture, there were so many people that were already in the field that I know really kind of mentored him and worked with him. And he formed a great family in the agriculture teachers of Arkansas. I know Marion Fletcher is a big one that was one of the state leaders in agriculture in Arkansas, and he leaned on him some, and I think Marion also leaned on Dad. But I just see it as one big family. I can't think of any one person that inspired him as much as they just fed off each other. But I feel like my dad was a catalyst in a lot of that, because he was so eager to do for others and grow the field.
What would you say if you could distill down some of the wisdom that he shared? Like, what are the values? And maybe you had conversations where he would like share wisdom with you. What if you could distill it for me? What would you say? What's the wisdom and insight that you would take away from what you learned from your dad?
One of the biggest things that I've heard a lot of people say about him, and I agree, is that he listened more than he spoke a lot of times, because he was very thoughtful, and he would really think about things before he would share his opinions. And yet he wanted me to share mine. He wanted me to put the thought behind it and not just speak off the top of my head. And just the work ethic, he never seemed to sleep. Like, he was on call 24/7. It didn't matter if somebody's, cow was in labor and having trouble at 3 o'clock in the morning, they would call him and he was there. It didn't matter if somebody had trouble in the hayfield, he was there. And I feel like his work ethic went with him through all the years, and tells me that he put others before himself. He never complained about, I can't believe they called me at 3 o'clock in the morning. I never heard Dad complain about stopping anything he was doing to go help someone else. So I would have to say the thinking before you speak, the being, putting others before himself, and just that extreme work ethic that he had are three of the big ones to me.
Those are pretty big ones. I'm glad I asked that question.
No, thank you.
How did your father's faith influence his life and impact the way he saw others and the way he treated others?
His faith was really incredible. I always knew it, but our time at the hospital with him really brought that to light. He was in the hospital for 20 days prior to him going home and passing there. But the whole time he was in the hospital, once he realized what was going on, why he was there, and that it didn't look good, it didn't change his demeanor or his outlook at all. The nurses would come in and he would tell them, how glad he was to see them, how great they were doing. He was the most positive man that all the nurses just loved coming to his room, because he just lifted them up. And to be in the situation he was in and still want to be a light to someone else was so inspiring. Matter of fact, there was a nurse in particular that she came in one day and she told him, she said, "Mr. Daniel, I wasn't wanting to come to work today. I was about to call in because I just didn't feel like coming to work. But then I remembered you were going to be here." And she said, "That's why I came today." She goes, "Because I knew you would make my day." And that's just how he was. No matter when you saw him, what he was doing, how he felt, he made everybody else feel important, and he left them feeling good about themselves. And then the chaplain came in to pray with him, and he's really complimented him on doing that job for other people. And because he said, "I know where I'm going when I die, when I leave this earth, but I'm so glad that you're doing what you're doing, because I want everybody else to be able to know that too." So he thanked him. And I guess one of the big things too was when he realized what was wrong with him, he said, "I don't know why this is happening to me." He goes, "But I really hope that my going through this can help somebody else out one day." So he never was angry that he was sick. He never questioned, "Why me, God?" It was, "Well, I hope God can use this to help somebody else." So I think his faith helped him to have that selfless compassion for others, and just that heart, that servant's heart that he always wanted to do for others more than he cared about doing for himself a lot of times.
Well, selfless and humble are absolutely words that multiple people used when they talked about your dad. They talked about his humility. So, for those listening who may not know your dad's story, not only did the entire town come together to celebrate Melvin's life, but it was also unanimously decided that the school where he taught for over 30 years, Lake Hamilton, would name their new farm the Lake Hamilton High School Melvin Daniel FFA School Farm. What do you think your dad would think of that?
Well, they told me about it a few days before he actually passed. And at that point, he couldn't communicate with me, but I told him as I was holding his hand, I wanted him to know, and I'm hoping that he heard me. I feel like he did, because I told him what they were doing, and I said they were about to present the resolution, but it was a done deal that they're going to name that farm after you, and they want this to be a place where kids can raise animals, or they can do greenhouse horticulture type work. I said, but they wanted to name that after you because they know how important that's always been for you to have kids involved in projects. And and he knew that a lot of times that they couldn't do that at their homes, and so he would many times have extra animals at our house for kids to raise, and they would come over and take care of them just so they could have that experience of raising an animal from to little bitty up to time to show, and experience that responsibility that involved. So when I told him, he kind of squeezed my hand, and he kind of nodded his head, and so I think he heard me, and I know that he was very humbled by it, because my dad is not one that ever bragged on himself about anything. He never expected anything in return for any of his good deeds. That's just the way he was. And so it might have even embarrassed him a little bit, but I think he would be really tickled about it. The fact that it's helping kids out would be his most important, part of that. He would really love that.
And what a beautiful legacy that that building will be there now to serve, to do the work that your father was so passionate about, providing those opportunities and those experiences for kids that otherwise may not ever have the chance. So I thought it was so beautiful that they named that, and that for generations to come, students who come through the Lake Hamilton Ag program will, even though they've never gotten a chance to meet your father, they'll get to know his name, and he'll still get to be a part of their life. So I really thought that was such a touching thing, and just a beautiful testament to the legacy that he was really leaving. Um, let's see. So here's a big question for you. Having seen the impact that your dad had on so many lives in the community and the legacy that he left, how has that impacted you, and what do you hope that your legacy will be?
It's really been quite overwhelming. um, I knew my dad knew a lot of people, and I knew a lot of people loved dad, but until you see all those people gathered together, or until you start getting all of those cards and messages and texts, it just didn't really hit home how big of an influence that he really had. Um, so I was overwhelmed, but I was also blessed, and it was comforting to know that even though my dad's left this earth, he hasn't really gone, because so many are still living their lives because of things that he blessed them and helped them with. So I kind of can see the fruits of his labors, I guess. But it's really taught me to be more conscious and aware of ways that I can help others, and ways that I can influence those around me in a positive way. I always feel like, since I'm an educator also, I feel like I do that on a daily basis. That's what I try to do, is influence my students and give them tools to help them be successful. But it's helped me to see that it doesn't matter where I am, I can influence people, because it didn't matter if my dad was in the classroom, if he was driving a school bus across in another state. He influenced people wherever he was at. And that's what I feel like all of us can do, that if we just show that kindness and compassion, and just look where there's a need, and fill those spots, to help other people out when we have the talents and abilities to do so.
Absolutely. What a beautiful, beautiful testament. Stan, did you have any other questions for Melissa?
No other questions. I'm just, I'm proud of him. I know he would be proud of you too. And it's
Thank
great
you.
to see that, his influence is continuing in the work that you do.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for listening. This has been the Your Life, Your Legacy podcast with your hosts, Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand. Our guest today was Melissa Anthony, who joined us to honor the life and legacy of her father, Melvin Daniel. For more information on Melvin or to support the Lake Hamilton High School Melvin Daniel FFA School Farm, you can visit lhwolves.net. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us. It was an absolute privilege.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Your Life, Your Legacy podcast with Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand. If you enjoyed the show, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To find out more about Stan and Katie Beth, go to pinnaclelegacylaw.com. You can also find links in the show notes.